Thanks for tuning in to the World XP podcast. If you're enjoying the content, please drop a sub, drop a like, and let us know your thoughts below in the comments. Also, please consider supporting our podcast via the link below. It really helps us out.
Bill, welcome to the World XP podcast. How are you, man?
I'm doing all right. How you doing today?
Not too bad. Not too bad. This delay is going to be crazy. We're just talking offline. There's going to be 5-second
I know
pauses in
it's
between
it's
everyone.
killing me right now.
That's all right. So let's do a quick intro.
I'm gonna try to preempt what you're saying and answer ahead of time.
This might be the most like telepathic one or the worst one of ever. No in between. So let's start with who you
Yep.
are
All right.
and what you do, and then we'll jump into the question from the last guest, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah,
So-
sure, that works, man. So my name is Philip Howard. I work as an IT and data consultant. What I do is I work with businesses to help them build out platforms that give them a better understanding of what's going on, like sales internally, whatever they do, by connecting all their data points.
Well, yes, you also use AI though. That's the big thing, right? So a lot of data stuff, but AI though as
Yeah,
well.
kind of buried the lead, didn't I?
Yeah, you did. You buried it a little bit. That's all right. That's all right.
So, yeah. All right, so let me try that again. So the cool part about this, because I usually make that as fast as possible. I've been to many a Thanksgiving where I start talking about what I do and people's eyes go different directions. Okay, but the whole world runs on data, right? Literally everything runs on data. That's what makes things smart. That's what makes people smart. You go to school, you're learning data. You're in science class, you're reading the data from people from past experiments and stuff, right? I can go on about this, and you don't want me to, but what this all builds up to is the more stuff you know, the more stuff you can do. And it's the same thing with machines, especially as far as we go with AI now, because once upon a time, a computer would only do what you told it to. It was a running joke. The computers are stupid. What you do when you teach people to program is when you try to get them to wrap their head around that idea, you tell them, all right, give me instructions on how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And they say, okay, well, you take some peanut butter, you put it between two slices of bread, and you put it together. And people, you go and do that literally. You take a jar of peanut butter and you slap it with the jar, and you put it between two slices of bread. It's stupid. Computers are stupid. But now with AI, because of how they're trained and the way they work, with all of the data that we have now, it gives the facade of intelligence, of creativity, of being able to come up with solutions to things that it was not given beforehand. So yeah, I like working with data because this is what it leads to.
Fair enough. Okay. So you said a lot of interesting things, but I'm gonna ask you this now because I'll forget if I don't. Um, question from Cody, who was the last guest, who unfortunately his episode got taken down for reasons that I don't understand, but that's okay. His question is, what's something your profession has made you realize your perspective on something in life was completely wrong? So you thought something about something in your life, and then you started working in your field, and you were like, that is not the case at all.
I thought that the the more money a company had, the bigger it was, the more advanced it was, the bigger the name, the longer it's been around, the more advanced stuff they would do, the more they'd have it together. The cooler, better tech that they would have, the smarter the people. Now, I'm gonna get in trouble here. I work in consulting, so I'm gonna say stuff, and people are working with me, and they're like, "Hey, were you talking about me?" I'm like, no, dude, that wasn't you. I swear. No, but the truth is, you know what the entire world runs on? Excel. It still works on Excel. We have millions and millions and millions of dollars in advanced databases and software and technology, and people are still using spreadsheets. You don't want to know how many of your bank accounts are run on spreadsheets. um, it's the world is not as complicated. It's extremely complicated, but it's not as complicated as people like to believe. That's all sci-fi stuff here. People are just people, and everything's run by people. So my profession has taught me that don't make something out to be what it's not. Don't make things bigger than what they are.
Yeah, 100%.
I don't know
That's
if
a
that's a good
super
answer or not, but that's
no,
what I'm
it's
going with.
that's a very good answer because we see this all the time. Like you said, these big systems and organizations and companies, at the end of the day, they're all run by a person who's generally speaking, just like everybody else, a
Man,
bunch of
this delay is
bones and
rough.
is it really? Do you wanna take five? Let's try and like reboot and start again. And we're back, possibly, maybe. We'll see how the delay
If
is now. We
if fingers crossed.
made a couple of changes. Um, where were we? Oh yeah, big organizations at the end of the day is all run by a human being who's just bones and muscles and whatever. Um, and that's a very, very good point because we think of these organizations as, and people joke about it as well. Like, it's like, oh, I like this organization takes so slow. And it's like, dude, you're a part of that organization. But it's like people differentiate themselves from the organization. We almost think of them as not groups of people. It's kind of strange. Similar to how you could say countries and their governments are not the same, even though the people live there. Um, yeah, so it's a weird kind of indictment on the state of things at the moment, that things have become so big that we view organizations as their own entities.
It's funny, you bring up a much more interesting philosophical point than I did because I was just making a joke about Excel. But what I actually have learned from being a consultant, getting to that kind of inside peek into how businesses operate and who makes the deals and how decisions are made, uh, is that the most important thing you can learn is that people like working with people they like. You know, businesses are run by people. It's the the fact that businesses are seen as their own entity, like the way you described, and it absolutely, I mean, legally speaking, that's exactly what they are. Is bonkers, and that's what keeps people from trying new things, trying to break the rules because they think that this is the way it's supposed to run. You know, there's no way that I can get into this company, or there's no way that I can challenge this company to do something different. But I mean, it's just a collection of people. You can go up and that's why business. The joke is that business deals are all made on golf courses or in bars or in, I mean, God knows where else, because you're just talking to the people that run the show. They're just people, just like you and me. So
Yeah.
it's amazing. It's an amazing revelation when you see that.
And and then the people skill on top of that is figuring out which people have the authority or the like the pull to make something happen. Because oftentimes those people are not the people with the titles. It's some guy who maybe is the president really trusts some other guy, and you figure out who the other guy is that can convince the president because it's hard to talk to the president because they're so busy all the time doing whatever. It's like figuring that stuff out, even when you're within your own company. Like, hey, I think we should implement blank process. Figuring out who the right person to go talk to is a very valuable skill because sometimes they're the people that you think they are, but often they're not as well.
Honestly, I would compare that to trying to game the stock market. Like, all right, is it going to go up? Is it going to go down? Trying to pick that out is near impossible. What I think works really well, and I am not the model for this. Honestly, if I was going to chill for my wife, she's incredible at this. But just be likable and be open to talk to people, talk to everybody, talk to anybody, listen to people. People love being listened to, and you'd be amazed that just making a habit of talking to everybody you can and just figuring out what's going on in the day, who they are, what they like, what they do. You never know who you're going to bump into, who knows who, and just things will suddenly start happening because they know you, and this person knows you, who knows this person. And if you just make a habit of doing that, it's not going to happen overnight. But if that just becomes your personality, you'd be amazed the network that you've built without even without being as predatory as sales.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I fully agree. Um I have friends that I kind of mention that to. I'm like, first impressions are so important, and it's not even the like gaming the system kind of in the way that you mentioned, but exactly like you mentioned, to be not predatory, but just to listen and actually take a genuine interest in somebody for like 2 minutes. Like it's not that long, right? It's
Mhm.
like how much effort does it really take to take a genuine interest in somebody else for 2 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever? And that could make all the difference between you getting a job or making a deal or doing whatever, all of these things. And I think it's super important. Just I mean, even if you're just in line at the grocery store or whatever, and somebody says something to you, like it's like little things can go such a long way you don't even realize. And to your point about it not happening overnight, that's also entirely correct. And then, but it'll start to snowball eventually, because your little network will build, and somebody will be like, oh yeah, this guy's application ran across my desk. Do you know who that guy is? And they're like, no, but I know somebody who do. And then they'll call that other person, and it's like, oh, that guy's really nice. Like I met him a couple times at blank, and like it snowballs for you. So because all it takes is one bad one to like
That's
ruin
it.
ruin all of it. And so
Yep.
you have to build up enough cushion to kind of, if something bad happens, you've got enough like built up in the bank that it's okay. You had a bad day that day.
Exactly. I literally just had something to say and it just went right out of my mind. So I'm blaming that on 7:30 at night.
Fair enough.
This
enough.
is gonna be a fun hour.
No, it'll be good because now we'll. So, what we talked about before when we were on the phone, for those listening, is real heavy on the AI piece. And that's something that I haven't had an AI person on the show before, and I'm trying to branch out and talk to all sorts of different people who are doing all sorts of different things. And so, obviously, I think really hit the lexicon kind of with Chat GPT. Like people knew what AI, like had heard the term, but it really just popped into everybody's life with Chat GPT. So I don't know, like what's been your experience? Like how did you get into an AI sort of field? Was that something that you'd been wanting to do? Um, like how did you end up in it, and what is your interpretation of what is going on with it and its, I'll say, evolution into the mainstream at the moment?
So that is a very, very big question.
Well,
Probably a bunch of places I can go. Um, so the world was super crazy about AI. I mean, even back in like what was it, 2019, I think. That's when the first big hype was coming out when people were doing all kinds of like machine learning and all sorts of cool stuff like that, where data science was the field to get into. You know, you wanted to make lots of money, you wanted to be like a super smart guy in the room who's going to be working on really cool stuff. You had to be a data scientist. I don't think anybody really knew what that meant. That's kind of like where I mean, you just went to school and you learned how to do statistics and a bunch of other stuff, and then on top of that, you learned programming because that's where all the ML stuff was doing. And God bless the ones who did, because now they built out all the stuff that made it way easier for guys like me to do it. But when it really came back to life, you're right. It came out with ChatGPT when OpenAI released that and made it mainstream, where people could just talk to something and it could be creative. I mean, that just blew people's minds. It still blows my minds on a regular basis, and that was actually my first intro into it. So I don't know what. I guess it didn't even need a marketing department. I mean, the word of mouth just went wild. I mean, you saw the stuff on like Instagram and TikTok, people talking about it. Like, this wrote my kid's essay, and of course, I rolled my eyes a little bit because I remember the first hype. I'm like, all right, yeah, sure. I go to ChatGPT and I start playing around with it, and like my mind is blown. I don't remember the first. I gotta look at my history here. My ChatGPT history is wild. I think like the first thing I did was I had it write like a kid's book for like about like my wife, my kid, me and their nanny, just to kind of show what it did, and it was beautiful. It was beautiful. It was touching and sweet and to the point. Like it covered like, you know, maybe it would have been like 3 or 4 pages long, right? And it was very sweet. And I mean, it was crazy. And then from there, I wanted to see. Did like a deep dive into all the random stuff you could do with it, because being able to make it dance was the fact that that you could have so much control over it made it so much more fun. So that's where things like prompt engineering came in, where you can give it specific instructions on like the persona you wanted to take. Maybe you wanted to talk like Mr. T or friggin' William Shatner or something. I don't know. And you could have it write poems about World War II in the voice of Martha Stewart or something. I mean, I don't know. You could do all sorts of cool stuff like that. Or if you wanted to turn the tables on it and have it ask you questions, you could do that too. I think I had it do a my wife and I were talking about one day maybe building a house. It's one of those like moonshot ideas that, you know, would want to do. And I'm like, hey, I don't know anything about building a house. You are an architect and design consultant. Talk me through the process, starting from beginning stages, and ask me, all of my preferences, and wait for my response, and then build off of that. And it one by one, it would ask me a question like, how many rooms do I want? How big do I want it? I would give it an answer, and then it would ask me like, hey, everything from the style of the home, the layout, the what region I'm going to live in, because that would play into what type of how I would want it insulated, or what type of windows I would want, right? The design of the kitchen, the hardware, all that stuff. It sparks the imagination in a way that nothing has in a very, very long time, and it makes people wonder what's possible. And when you start looking at it in terms of what it can do for you as an individual, and then what it can do for companies, and what it can do for schools, like what it can do for education, I mean, everybody can benefit from this. So naturally, I was just I was in it. I was enthralled. I couldn't get away from it. So my experience with it after getting my fill, I mean, I say get my fill of ChatGPT as if I'm done with it. It's literally open up on my screen right now. Is as a consultant now, of course, every single company hears about this disruptive technology, and they're like, hey, I don't know what this is or what we can do with it, but I know we need it. We need it, or we're going to be left behind. So companies are just spending crazy dollars trying to figure out exactly how it can be used in their business. Because when it first came out, I mean, it was cool, but it felt like maybe a toy is the wrong word, but how does it have any immediate impact to my business? And so now everybody's scrambling to come up with like all of these really cool applications and services that can somehow work with what I'm doing in business and make me more money. Sadly, that's the core of my job, is I help businesses make more money. So it seems kind of mercenary, but it affords me the opportunity to learn all sorts of things about what's coming out, what companies are making what, between Google and Meta and OpenAI, and like all the open source work that's going on. So I guess I would count myself fortunate, because I'm in a position where I can do that. I definitely didn't go out looking for this, so it's not like I was searching for a job in AI, because I mean that didn't even exist. For that matter, I didn't even look for a job in data, but that's a whole other conversation. But I'm here, and I love doing it.
Yeah, fair enough. I think a toy is the right word when you say you weren't sure. I think it is the right word when it first came out. People were like, "Oh, this is this thing that I can mess around with." Another thing that I found interesting was about what you said was the uses and applications for it at first. Similar to a lot of things when it first comes out, I think information is moving so fast now that companies feel like they have to take more risk than before. I feel like if this comes out 20 years ago, I feel like there was more embracing of this than say when like email came out back in the early 2000s. At least I wasn't that old, but from what I hear, from what I hear, people were like, "Why do you need email? You can just send mail. What does email do?" And now no company can do anything without email. And I feel like people were much quicker to maybe take the leap immediately and say, "I don't know what this is, and I don't really know how to use it, but I'm gonna try and figure out how to use it," rather than say, "No, that's stupid." And I wonder. I've kind of like seen this, or maybe I've I've made this up, but this pattern that I've seen of like people who like the gap between the the ability to like take off with a business is much faster now than it used to be, and the ability to just absolutely plummet and tank also can happen. Like things are happening much fast. Is that a fair assessment? Have you seen kind of like a similar situation with people jumping to embrace AI, and it both working and maybe not working? I don't know if AI can
Yeah.
like tank a company yet, but
So there's a few things there. I'll get to them one by one here because those are all really good questions here. First, with the companies adopting AI, as a rule, companies tend to be pretty change averse because they're risk averse. If what they got is working and they're making money off of it, if they mess with a winning solution, they risk losing a lot of money if they're wrong. But there's been enough lessons learned over time, a lot of lessons learned about the dangers of ignoring disruptive technology. So if you're smart in what you're doing, if a business is smart, they've always got somebody keeping an eye on the horizon, saying, okay, what's coming down the road? What can really change things? What's going to make us have to change to keep up? And that speaks a lot. The fact that everybody is jumping on the AI train right now, a lot of it is hype, but a lot of it is not. And the fact that everybody is jumping on kind of speaks to how disruptive this is. Because you're right, everybody feels like they need to have it. They don't know what it is yet. They don't know how. They don't know how they're going to use it. They don't know how it's going to make them money or benefit them yet. And that's why they bring in literally anybody who claims to have any amount of knowledge on it, which to be perfectly frank, isn't much. Because it's changing so quickly. Our experience is everything we've learned and done and built over the last year. I mean that's nothing in terms of new technology, right? But companies are just asking anybody with any amount of experience to come in and tell us, hey, how is this going to help us? Because we need it before we get left behind, because it is changing so fast. And the abilities of the models today are improving so quickly. Everybody's all the big guns out there that are making these models here are coming out with the newer, the bigger, the better models with all the new capabilities. It's insane what's possible now, compared to what was possible just a year ago. So yeah, companies are trying to jump on this. The other question where it is easy for people to jump in and kind of start new businesses, and these things will tank businesses. That's also true, and not just because of AI. Especially with tech, the barrier to entry is much, much, much less than it was, let's say, 10 years ago. Because I'm not old enough to speak to like 30 or 40 years ago, but a lot of that has to do with the cloud, everything that's coming out now. So you've got your three main. I think I'm gonna piss off some other platforms here, but the platforms that I mess with here, you got Azure, you've got AWS, and you got Google, and then you've got a whole bunch of different other platforms that are built on top of them. The short of that, if anybody listening is unfamiliar, is just that you're in a computer space. You've got all of these services that are offered that make it easier to build new applications. If you've got some great idea about how you're going to build an app, or how you're going to, you want to start a business, and you want to have like a database and to store your data, and you want to have something a little more sophisticated than just writing stuff down on an Excel sheet. You can do that for much less of a cost than you would back in the day. Back in the day, you'd have to buy these gigantic servers, right? You have to set up you'd have to set up a special room and provide security and make sure that power's going to it right, and God forbid that somebody flips the wrong light switch and everything shuts down. It's not like that anymore, so it's much easier to get into it than it was before. Now, combine that with AI. AI is the great equalizer. The only thing I can compare this to is like the internet or Google, where anybody with any amount of desire to learn, I just want to know more, I want to be better, I want to try something new, all they have to do is ask. I can go to ChatGPT right now, and in fact I have. This is earlier today and yesterday I was doing my own little pet project here, where for whatever reason I wanted to understand how this encryption algorithm worked. It's called SHA-256, if you know about it. Nothing new, and I just wanted to learn about it. And I asked it to, okay, you are a professor of encryption, and tutor me from base principles on how the SHA-256 encryption algorithm works. and it gives me a whole outline, and then I ask it to dive deeper into each step. And then it does that. And then I say, okay, well, I don't quite understand this. Can you provide me an example? And it builds out an example and shows me how all the calculations are done, and say, okay, well, what if you did it this way? I don't, does this happen every time just like this? Is, well, no, actually, you would do it that way. It's like talking to a personalized tutor, who listens to you, who's patient, who can adjust on the fly, who doesn't get frustrated with you. So you can learn anything you want. And now there are some risks that I'm happy to talk about in a bit here, but you can learn anything you want. You can create basic. Again, God, I feel like I have to attach like little fine print here. Just like be very careful about this. But you can create like basic contracts, or you can create marketing material, or you can create your own brand, like your profile. You can talk through it about like brand management. If you wanted to start a company, you can talk through about potential risks to starting a business in starting a restaurant. Let's say you want to start a restaurant. What are all the things you'd have to consider? And it would give you ideas, and you can bounce ideas. You can dig deeper into those points. You're not limited anymore. If you wanted to try, you can. And it's an incredible shift in the power of who knows what. And I'm really looking forward to see what that happens. But yeah, it is easier to start your own thing. You can work on your own. You can jump into it with everybody else. And for that reason, that's exactly why companies who aren't embracing this are going to fall. You have to learn about it. Even if you're not building things with it, at least understand it. Be literate. It's no different than when computers first came out, when the internet first came out. You're gonna have to be literate and understand it and be a part of it. Otherwise, you're gonna fall behind.
Yeah, that makes total sense. The education thing is interesting because did you go to college?
I did, yeah.
Okay, I couldn't remember because I knew that you were doing military stuff, and oftentimes that takes the place of school for some people. But so you've obviously seen, I would assume, the stuff about college being not worth the money anymore, and people should go to trade school or whatever because then you're not $100,000 in debt or whatever the number is. You've seen all that, right? So
Yeah.
this is my question, and I there's no answer. I don't think, but a thought that I've had is, so I totally agree with all the things that I just laid out. The thing also though is I feel like we're entering a bit of like a Wild West period, because one of the things that colleges were able to provide was a kind of a certification that everyone could trust, and like an accreditation. It's like, you went here, we know that you learned at least like blank things and whatever. Now you got people maybe rightly saying, I became like an electrician on YouTube and I took this one test on the internet and now I'm certified because some website said I was. And then it's like, do you want that guy to come to your house and like mess with your electrical system? It's like, well, I don't really know what I want. That, like, you know what I mean? And so Chat GPT is gonna, and AI generally, I should stop calling AI Chat GPT because it's not that. It's AI is its own thing. But AI is going to become kind of, like you said, the great equalizer, and people are going to have access to all this information and knowledge without necessarily the accreditation. And I am fully behind someone putting the universities in their place, right? But I wonder what would take the, like, that part of it away. Like that piece of it is the reason, at least to me, why they haven't just tanked completely yet. And I wonder how society is going to like fiddle through that, because there's going to be some growing pains for sure. Like, you're going to have people advertising as, oh, I'm an expert in this. Like, how do you know? Well, I just put it into AI and it taught me. It's like, well, I don't really know that you know that. Like, you can put it on a resume and you can answer all the right questions in the interview because you prepared, you studied really for it. And then as soon as you get on the job, you don't actually know what you're doing. And I mean, that's okay, right? Like, you can train people, but I don't, like, what are your thoughts on that as society as a whole kind of going through that? It feels like a transition process and a bit of a kind of growing pains for society as a whole. I mean, obviously, there's other things going on in society that make life not the easiest at the moment, but this one in particular feels like a big one as well.
So yeah, you're gonna hear me jump back and forth across both sides of the fence a lot on this, and it might frustrate you, but
Oh,
bear with
sure.
me.
Speculate all this. That's what this is for, right? People just having a conversation.
First off, knowledge absolutely shouldn't be gate kept by a degree. So I've met some very dumb people with degrees. It's just a fact. Having a degree doesn't make you smart. It means you can finish something, which I think when people require that you have a degree, I think that's really what they're looking for. They know you can show up on time, they know you can commit to something, and you can finish it. But still, there's no guarantees there. And more on top of that, I guess I would say that I've, as much fun as I had at college learning the things that I did, my story is not much different than anybody else's when I say that I am not using at all what I learned in college in terms of my degree. I learned how to problem solve, which I use every single day. But I'm not. But my degree was in biophysics, and I did that just because I took a physics class and I enjoyed it. I was like, oh, this is really cool. I don't no, I don't use physics at all. Why would I? Um, but I've learned more outside of school than I have in college. And in my own opinion, that's the way it should be. I've been out of school for, all right, carry the two. We'll say, I don't know, like to a 10, God, how long has it been? Let's see, it was 20, well, we'll just say 10 years because of ease of math and I don't feel like remembering right now, but it's been a while, man. If I stopped learning the day I got out of school, then I'd be dumb. Let's, I guess if most people felt that way, the world would be dumb, so take from that what you will. And if we're making comments about the state of society right now, but you should always be learning. You should always be picking up new things. It doesn't have to be studying. It's just having interest. What's new? How does it work? Be curious. Having curiosity makes you an expert eventually. You know. So with the university thing out of the way, well, not quite yet. My opinion of what's going to happen when knowledge becomes this accessible, when creation becomes this accessible, is that universities will probably go back to what they used to be, which is a place for people to expand our existing knowledge. That's what all the PhDs do, right? I mean, that's the whole reason they work at the university. It's not to be a teacher. That's part of their contract. You get to use our facilities and experiment and learn and philosophize and think, in exchange for teaching us, and we'll also give you a paycheck. But I think it might be more for that, you know. Now, when it comes to defining who's an expert, I mean, you ever had a handyman in your home? You know, it's hit and miss, you know, but you trust that they know more than you do. You get to know the person, you see the quality of their work, and you're like, okay, this person actually knows what they're doing. It's going to take a little bit of due diligence, and I mean, it always has. This isn't really a new idea. The only difference is the white collar jobs that require some amount of training may come from different places now. And mind you, I'm not saying that AI is going to replace education, because, and I'm going to go ahead and talk about the caveats right now because I keep going back to it. AI is super cool. It's trained on a huge amount of data from the internet, all this text that just scrapes off, and it learns it's trained to predict how sentences should end, and it's very, very good at it. But if it doesn't have information to predict off of, it's very, very good at confidently making stuff up. If you ask it about facts and things that happened at whatever date, it might get it right, but I would definitely double check it, because it is like those guys in the room who will confidently just talk. They will be talking out of their ass, but you believe every word they say, because if you don't know any better, you can't check them. One day AI will run for politics. It's a thing. So it will absolutely not replace education, but it's a great facilitator. It helps enable you, and it speeds up your ability to accomplish tasks. So instead of all of like this mundane rote work, which used to be limited to just like some things you could automate, now you can automate creativity, which sounds terrifying because that used to be what differentiated us from machines, right? How are we better than machines? Well, because we can be creative and you can't. But now that we can do that, you can now focus on other things and you can accomplish so much more. So I think I went off on a wild tangent there, but
No, that's good.
when it comes to experts, I would say use your judgment, man. I don't think a piece of paper is going to cut it anymore.
Yeah, no, I fully, that's exactly the point that I was making. And you went into at the end this spot that I didn't mean to put you in, but I think well, it's not even a bad spot, but it's just where the conversation went is you mentioned that AI could be a great facilitator of education. And then also we talked at the beginning about companies embracing and growing with AI, or like using AI more and more. So how do we, without being too resistant to it, understand that it could be a good facilitator and not, right? Because people will take full advantage, as you know, right? There's going to be people that get through school using AI and like they haven't actually learned anything other than to use AI, which I guess is kind of important. If you know how to use AI, you can do a lot of things. But like, where do we start to kind of, I'm where I'm headed is the future of AI, and like where is it going with, like, do you have concerns, not concerns, right? Education is one piece of the pie, but you mentioned AI is going to run for president one day, or politics, I think you said. So where what are your concerns? You mentioned there are some risks that you had thought about earlier. I don't know if now is a good time to jump into those, but that's kind of where my brain is at.
So before anybody calls me a kook here, I'm saying that AI is going to run for politics because it's great at just making up stuff on the fly and being super confident about it.
No politician has ever done that in the history of the world. Not
No, no,
once.
no, never, man. I have complete faith in the people running our government. I'm not, look, I'm not worried about AI. Maybe that makes me naive, but I'm also, you have to understand society is going to change. It's just going to change. This is the Industrial Revolution all over again. The world is going to be different. And you can fight it, you can scream, you can plant your feet and say, this, I'm not doing it, I won't accept it, we're going to do this way because it's the only way I understand. But you're going to be left behind and you're going to hate it. And it sucks because it's it's not hard to jump on board. This is one of those, it was probably the first technology that is self teaching, like meaning if you're that old person who gets handed a cell phone for the first time, you're like, dude, I just give me my clamshell, I just want to dial a number and talk to somebody, right? um or I don't, I don't want to use a computer, or my PC's cup holder keeps closing on me. um Sorry, that's a very old joke from CD-ROMs. But with something like ChatGPT, you talk to it like you would anybody else. With AI, it's intended to have a human-like interface. You don't have to change anything about who you are or what you do to be able to benefit from it. So if you're gonna fight against it, I mean, that's a personality thing, man. And it sucks because I don't want to see anybody left behind on this one, but society, everything's going to change. And again, to go back to education, because it's the easy example to use. You have teachers who are banning the use of of AI and all that in the classroom. Totally understandable. I get it. Because let's say you're an English teacher, how are you going to make sure that your kids do their homework? How are you going to make sure that they're actually writing the papers that you're grading? Are you grading something that was created by a computer? What's the point? I'm wasting my time. Totally get it. And I guess I'm trying to draw a comparison to anything else. Maybe like when's the time to introduce a calculator into the classroom? You know, when you start teaching math, it is important to learn how to do these things. It is important to learn how to write, how to formulate your thoughts, how to be concise or clear, how to be descriptive, understanding how to express yourself. These things are critical to being successful just as a human in society. But we're not going to be able to do it the way we have been all this time. It's going to have to change. You're not going to be able to stop it. All of the tools that have come out saying that we can detect papers that have been written by AI. I mean, that's all garbage. More often than not, they give false positives, and you get people who actually wrote the stuff they wrote in trouble. We just have to think differently about how we approach education, how we approach society, what's okay and what's not. That's going to get into a whole other ball of wax when we talk about like ethical considerations and things when it comes to AI. But things are going to change, and I'm not scared of it. I guess by the time it's important to be scared, then well, I won't be here anymore. Neither will you. But I'm not really worried about the sci-fi stuff yet.
That's fair. The writing thing you mentioned is interesting to me as well, because I never realized that the point of writing a paper was to answer a question about something that I was interested in. I just wrote it because I thought I had to write it. And I feel like if somebody had told me that, at least maybe in middle school, I wouldn't have understood why, but at least in high school, like pick something that's like, if somebody's like, pick something you're interested about and then go find stuff out about it and then write down what you're interested in. And then, like, if somebody had mentioned that to me, I feel like it would have gone differently. Maybe, well, maybe not, who knows. But when using AI in that would have been a great. There's definitely part of me that would have been like, oh, I'll just take this paragraph and use it. But there's another part of me that would have been learning how to ask the AI the questions to actually get the information that I needed. And I feel like that's a very important skill. I've had to learn that on like this podcast as well, like figuring out. There's been conversations where I've left being like, damn, I really wanted to know blank, and I couldn't formulate the right question to actually get at what I was looking for. And that's a really important question, because with the podcast, we can record, we can talk for an hour, it doesn't matter. But if you have 5 minutes with somebody and you really need to know a specific piece of information and you can't figure out how to ask it, you're sunk. It doesn't matter. So like you said, I get the banning of AI, but that's a totally different skill set as well that like is worth pursuing, or just telling people that it exists. Like that's a skill set in and of itself that I don't think people talk about enough. And I think that AI, like you're talking about with Chat GPT, is like, how do I come up with a way to approach a problem, is something that chat or AI, I keep doing it, AI can help with. Yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts about that?
No, you're absolutely right. And being able to ask the question well is a skill set. And that goes back to all the prompt engineering and stuff, if you want to give a fancy term to it. But it's just being able to speak well, being able to be clear, being able to follow up on your questions. You know, don't be afraid to dig into it. That's actually another thing that and I base this off of nothing, but I imagine it's the case. When you're talking to a person, you're asking them to explain. I don't know about you, but in the back of my mind, the more and more I ask somebody to dig into something, when a person is giving me their time, I'm always thinking, okay, am I taking too long? I don't want to, use up too much of this person's time. Am I being annoying? This is a judgment-free source of information. You can ask it to repeat it 6 different ways. You could ask it to rewrite it in French. Like it's you can do whatever you want with it, and being able to ask it that is a skill set. Now, I feel like there we are going to lose some skills, just like with the calculator. A lot of people can't do are not so great at mental math, because they were using a calculator since the first grade. Or maybe we're not writing in cursive anymore.
That's okay. No one misses that.
That's kind of my point, because you don't use it. The only reason you learn just enough cursive to write your signature. And I don't know, maybe 15 years from now, we're going to be signing things in like by fingerprint or by like DNA swab.
Ugh.
God knows, but I guess we can get into a long philosophical conversation about is it that big of a loss if we have machines that could do the stuff for us, if we can like focus on other abilities, on other skill sets. Personally, maybe I'm a little old-fashioned, but I think it is important to know the things that that it is able to automate for you. But that's me. Mind, so, all the same, society is going to change because of it, and we've just been talking about chatbots this whole time. By the way, ChatGPT or anything else. The world is going to be different from the myriad of things that are coming out. Just today, I read something about, I want to say it was Meta. I really hope I'm not wrong about that. I probably should have looked it up ahead of time. But there is, I swear to God, I probably already have it up already. My 6 million open tabs here. So anybody who's have you used Google Translate?
Mm-hmm.
Really, really cool. It got me through a vacation in Italy once. Don't speak a word of Italian, but I would try to get it to. I would try to prep on conversations. I got really good at asking for a taxi. I was on the phone, so I would just like look it up. Okay, now I can get on the phone as soon as they call. Okay, take a few deep breaths. Or I could say the words. But when I was caught off guard and I had to talk to somebody, I would put it on the back and forth mode, and it would go and translate the conversation. Super, super cool. An example of machine learning, if you want to call it AI. But for these purposes, when we're talking about AI, we're talking about like LLMs, which is the stuff that powers ChatGPT. What's coming out now is there, again, I think it was Meta, who is able to hear how you speak. Now, not just the words you're speaking, but the emphasis you put on the words, the tone that you're giving to the words, all that nonverbal communication that comes through your voice, not just like gestures and stuff like that, but the stuff that's related to your voice. And it's able to match that in the other language in a way that makes sense in that language, not just the rote translation, which anybody who's seen that before, if you've ever used the early days of Google Translate on the, I forget what the website was. It's probably you go to Google, say translate this to this, and you'll get like a word for word translation, and it would make zero sense. So if you ever want a fun game, just come up with like a short sentence, translate it into some other language, then take that language, translate it into the next, do it about 6 times in different languages, then go back to English and see what you get.
Not the same.
It's not. But my point is that it's not doing a word for word translation. It's giving the intent of the conversation of what you just said, which is mind blowing. If you can imagine 6 different people on this call right now, we all speak different languages, but what you're hearing is English and what they're hearing is their native tongue. I think about what that would do for this global world that we have now. The internet was the great connector between everybody, right? But now we can speak to each other. I mean, that's going to be incredible. The world is going to change. I know I keep beating that dead horse, man, but it's going to be so different.
Does it ever concern you, like what you just mentioned with language specifically, like the Tower of Babel, the biblical story where humans did that and God was like, no, we're not, like, I'm not super religious, but like, does that sort of, not that God will come do something, but like, do you ever get
Like,
into that Like I don't like we're going too far as humans. We're messing with stuff that we shouldn't be messing with.
And God's gonna be like, "I didn't you learn the first time? I told you to shut
Not
up."
not even with God, right? But like if AI becomes something that we didn't intend it to and we can't shut it off or something like that.
It in the quiet hours when I've got nothing better to do and I'm just sitting there thinking, what happens if artificial, not even general intelligence, where you got like Jarvis and all that doing all the super cool stuff for you in your Iron Man suit, but like when people talk about artificial super intelligence, where AI is able to teach itself and it will create new AIs that are like wildly smarter and think faster and all that, and all we can do is hope it doesn't nuke us. Um, yeah, I've gone down that rabbit hole once or twice. For my own sanity, for my own peace of mind, I try to avoid it because we're not there yet. I don't know if we will be. This
Yet.
again, the LLM stands for large language model. It's just a language predictor, and it's very, very sophisticated. And the funny thing is, we don't actually know 100% how it works. We know. Let me try that again. I feel like I hear Andre Karpathy like in the back of my head yelling at me. Which if you ever want a guy who can explain this very, very well, look up his YouTube videos. Dude is exceptional at explaining AI. We know how it works. We built it. We know how these things work, but we don't know how it comes to the conclusions that it does or its shortcomings. So speaking of Andre Karpathy, I actually was just watching one of his videos where he said one of the problems you'll run into is like, what do they call it? Like the reversal curse or something like that, where you could ask, who is Tom Cruise's mother? And it would give her name. I don't remember it off the top of my head. But then you ask, who is so-and-so's son? If you ask the mother's name, and it's like, well, I don't know. So there's a lot of mystery there when we're trying to figure out exactly how all the little neurons, and that's what they're called, the little, I guess, nodes where data passes through, how they work and how they come to the answers they come to. But how did I get off on this rant?
Is AI going to take over the world? That's how.
Is AI going to take over the world? Yeah, I was saying that. I mean, even we don't fully understand how it works. We do and we don't, but it's just predicting language. You can do a lot of cool stuff with it, but we have it. It doesn't yet use logic. It doesn't teach itself in the same way that like you or I do, and that's not saying that it won't. But again, even if it does, it's not saying that it's going to get to a point where it suddenly advances well beyond our control and we all die tomorrow. That being said, the hypotheticals that come out of it are super interesting. I forget where I read it, but there was somebody kind of trying to paint the picture of what that would look like if artificial superintelligence was a thing, and they were saying that it is impossible for the human mind to conceive of something so much smarter than it. You know, we're used to being smarter than everything else, and it's cute that dolphins can be trained to do things, and that chimps can do sign language, right? Because like, oh wow, they're super smart for animals, but we're always so used to being on top of the intellectual food chain. But if something was able to think and process and act at thousands of times faster than our brain can, they described the idea that it would be like, it would look at us as if we were plants, where we move very rarely, just kind of like plants do. Like if you watch it closely enough, you see a plant move towards the sun, but you have to sit there and watch. You got to put a camera on it to watch it. And it occasionally shows, they, meaning us, would occasionally show faint glimmers of intelligence. So you can only hope that if that happens, they would, face us towards the window and water us occasionally, rather than try to nuke us out of existence.
such a wild thing to like even consider or think about. It's well, I mean, by that point, who knows? But I don't know. I don't know.
Like I said, I don't think we're anywhere near there. You got your doomsayers, but I'm trying not to ride that train.
Yeah, fair enough. I want to touch on a little bit of the kind of the companies that are doing these things and where they are. Obviously, last time we talked, Sam Altman had just been fired, and then the entire fired by OpenAI, the board, and then like 90% of the company or 70 or some big chunk of the company was like, we're all gonna quit if you fire him, and so they were like, oh, our bad, we didn't mean it. But like, what's like, who are the players? What's the bit like? What's the situation? You've got this one guy, Sam Altman, who seems to be kind of at the center of everything. Microsoft is involved. Meta, obviously, putting lots of money and time and effort into it. Zuckerberg has been going on podcasts saying like their AI branch is the most expensive. Like he spends so much money on it that it's not even funny. So what's going on with the like? Is it those three really? Are there more or
Mostly, and I'm gonna sort of give the fine print up front here that you asked me to give like a poor man's report on this. So please, if I get any of the facts wrong, like check me here. But yeah, so OpenAI, they're the ones who created ChatGPT. They've got the arguably the most advanced model to date right now, which is GPT-4. Now they've got GPT-4 Turbo, which isn't, I think it's still in preview. And that's and Microsoft was really quick to jump on that train, where they partnered with them on the agreement that they can incorporate all of their technologies into all of their products. So all the Office products, Microsoft Outlook and Word and Excel, and then anything else that they're going to do. They offer it as a service in Microsoft Azure, their cloud platform. So really, really big move there. They put a huge amount of money into it. And from my understanding, the reason they fired Sam Altman is because the according to the board, he was less than forthcoming about how he did his business. Now, whatever that means, I'll leave that to people who knew it better. And especially there were people who wrote much more detailed reports on or summaries of what that was, but they felt that they couldn't trust him, and so they fired him, but they didn't count on a couple of things. One, the near cult-like fanaticism that his people have for both him and the technology that they're pioneering together. You don't get into this unless you fully believe that it's going to change the world. So they backed him, and then you had Microsoft, who had invested billions to be a part of this, and they see the board make a drastic maneuver like this. You got to imagine this was just an immediate migraine for whoever's running the show at Microsoft. I'll have to apologize in advance because I don't know names very well off the top of my head here, even though I read about it. But so from what I understand, they had they meaning Microsoft had some fallback options. They're like, okay, there's a number of ways we can do this. Either we talk to the board, we get Sam Altman reinstated and say, okay, our bad, we reacted a little rashly, knee-jerk reaction, but we can fix this. Or God, I forget what the other one was, but it all ended up
didn't they
being
just go to hire him themselves?
Well, that was option 3, and I'm quoting from memory yet another article that was again very well written. Maybe I've got it up here, and if I remember, I can just rattle it off here. But what ultimately ended up happening is they would not rehire him, and in fact, they, again meaning the board, had found somebody who would take the role. And so Microsoft's like, all right, well, okay, all of our plans are shot to shit here. So what we're going to do is we are going to take Sam Altman and literally anybody who will follow him. You guys all have jobs. We're practically, for all intents and purposes, absorbing OpenAI without actually having to buy you guys. And there was a petition, or I don't know, a paper, whatever, a letter signed by a huge percentage of the workforce that over there at OpenAI saying, you guys quit the board, you guys are gone, and we get Sam Altman back. Otherwise, we all walk, and this company just dies. And so he came back. I mean, he set the God, now I'm forgetting the old Apple CEO.
Ballmer,
No. The OG.
Steve Jobs.
Thank you. Wow, I didn't see. I told you about with names, man. He set the Steve Jobs speed run. That was exactly what happened to him, where he
Yeah.
was fired and left for a couple of years and came back, or I don't know how long it was, but yeah, he was gone and back in a weekend.
Was Ballmer Apple or was
it
he
was
Microsoft?
wild. You got me, man.
I'm
This is why
looking
this is
up
why
right
I
now.
shouldn't be a historian.
Microsoft. He was Microsoft. All right. Oh well. Okay, so that all that's happening, and so they've got the most advanced one, and then is Google's in the game as well, I believe, as well as Meta. So where are they standing with this? Are there some like dark horses, or is it kind of just are those four the only ones? Well, I'll say 3.5. I'll say Microsoft plus OpenAI, but is it kind of like those ones are the only ones with the
It's
funding and the brain power, or are there other ones that are kind of
No, it's a lot more open than that. So yeah, you've got the big ones there. So you've got Meta. They've got the Llama models. Like Llama 2 is an excellent model. Then you've got OpenAI. Of course, they've got the big ones. And they got Google. They just released Gemini and Gemini Ultra. I I have not had personal experience with Bard or with anything else that Google's come out with. I played with it a little bit, so I'm not speaking from experience, but I know um, from what I've been told from other people's experience and what I've read up on it that they haven't yet been able to compete with OpenAI. Ever since the initial Bard release, they've been trying to kind of make up for lost ground. It was kind of a catastrophe. Um, but they are in the game, and I wouldn't count them out. Um, Amazon has got their horse in the race too. They're creating their own models. What they're focusing on a lot is making services easily available. So not as much creating the most advanced model, but making it the most accessible. So all the cool stuff that you can build off of AI, being able to say talk to books, for example, and I'm using that just as a very relatable example. If you wanted to have it do a book report, you can actually give the AI more information, and it can take that book and summarize it for you, which is I mean I can talk all day about the cool stuff you can do with AI, but let's just I'm gonna divert right here and just so we can get to where we're going with this. But if we're going back to ChatGPT, it's not just what you say to it to make it do cool stuff. It's information that you give it. So if you give it, say, like your LinkedIn profile, and you're like, meaning like you take your summary and your skills and stuff like that, and you literally drop it in the chat box, like the text area, right? You say, hey, this kind of sucks. I need you to pizzazz this up for me and write it in a way that makes me more attractive to this type of position. Boom, it'll do that. If you ask it to summarize some lesser known novel that you really really like, it'll probably make up some goofy answer, which is kind of fun, but not what you're looking for. But instead, if you copy all the text out of it, you find a PDF somewhere and you just copy all the text and you drop it in there, and it's short enough, there are limitations to what it can do. But with the new stuff coming out, that window is getting larger and larger, what you can do with it. But if it's short enough, you can ask it direct questions about the characters, the motivations, summarize the plot, summarize or talk about the key conflicts, to do some real literary analysis on it. What I do professionally, what we've been talking to companies about, what we've been selling, is the ability to look at all of the documents that you have in Google Drive or SharePoint. Like if you've ever had to go and find an example of some type of slide deck, like from PowerPoint or something, and you're going through SharePoint hell trying to find it because there's like a million friggin' files there and you don't know which one you're looking for. You don't have to do that anymore, because if you set up your data in a way that you can connect it, there's a number of steps between here and there, but if you make this information available to the AI model, it can tell you, and you wouldn't even have to find the document. It can reference that and create something for you if you wanted it to. So wild amount of stuff that you can do. But all of that is sort of a complicated process. If you're not technical, there are a lot of tools that you'd have to set up and connect, and you'd have to arrange your data in a way that makes it readable or makes it useful. And what AWS has been focusing on, what Amazon has been focusing on, is making that process easier, simplifying it, and they've got tools for doing that. So Microsoft cashed in on the big model. They've got the best model there because they've got their partnership with OpenAI. Amazon is like, okay, well, we don't have that, so we're making a whole bunch of stuff available much more easily. And that brings to the whole open source community, meaning the freely available models. There's if you've never heard of Hugging Face, that's a website you can go to where all sorts of citizen developers can go out who've been working on these types of things, building out models, testing them, trying out different things. They can put that stuff there for other people to use. And it's, you get all kinds of feedback on it, and other people can contribute to it and things like that. So that's also something that's Amazon kind of jumped on. They're like, hey, we're going to partner with you and make all this stuff available. But there are a lot of people working on this now for the super big Uber models that require billions and billions and billions and billions of parameters, which is just like how many different steps it takes before it comes to an answer. Yeah, those are the big ones. You've got Meta, you've got OpenAI, you've got Google. Microsoft is probably going to do one of them, but then Amazon, I'm probably leaving a couple out, but yeah, those are the big ones.
Are we going to end up, do you think, in a situation where, like right now, we've got Google and Bing and I don't know, does Yahoo still exist? Maybe, I don't know, DuckDuckGo, like, but Google is for sure like the main, like Edge, I guess, is another one. Like, but Google is for sure the big, like Google has become a verb. Are we going to end up in a situation where one of these just takes off and is like installed on every computer, or is it going to be a more competitive thing, right? Because all of these companies have their own twists. Like you've got the Google workstation or workplace or whatever, where you've got Gmail and Google Docs and Google Sheets and all this stuff, and then you've got Outlook, right? Microsoft has their own suite of products, and they're like comparable-ish, but Microsoft really got in first. And then, like, are we going to end up in a situation where it's just on everybody's computer and everybody's got an instance of the Google one or the Amazon one, or like, is that where it's headed, or like where is it headed for? Because those are just like the bots, but there's other stuff that AI is doing as well that isn't like within that. Like, so I guess, are the bots headed that way? And then the rest of it, I guess we could talk about it for forever. But is that where you see kind of the bots headed?
If there's going to be a clear winner, that's definitely TBD. Excuse me. I don't yet see any one company just taking off and owning the whole market and saying, okay, all you guys are just pretenders and everybody's going to use me. But who knows what next year is going to look like. That being said, AI absolutely will be commonplace and incorporated into everything, whether it's Microsoft stuff or Google stuff or Meta stuff or whoever else is doing it. It's going to be incorporated into everything. And like I said earlier, Microsoft is already doing that with their whole Office suite. You can talk to it in a just regular human language and it'll create a PowerPoint for you. Again, I haven't used it. They are doing a very private preview right now with like invitation only. So I only know what I've read about. And Google is trying to do the same thing. Like I said, with Meta, they're doing their whole translation app, among God knows what else. It's going to be incorporated into everything we work with. We're with this new technology, like you said, it's the Wild West. We're limited by our creativity, so it'll be really cool to kind of see where it goes. But yeah, it'll definitely be commonplace.
I have one more question. And that is, if you were to say to somebody, the best way to get literate or to understand AI as it comes into our lives, or the best way to kind of become adapted to it is, like, what's your advice to people that are in the workplace and you're like, oh, I want to get a jump start, like a head start on this?
Go to ChatGPT and play with it. It's free. It's accessible. Just it's going to be a little awkward at first. You're just going to ask it questions like you would Google, and it's not going to work so well. But as you get over that, and you start talking to it more, and you start seeing kind of the responses that you get, and you start asking more questions or deeper questions, or maybe you change how you do things, you start to get a feel for how it works and how you get the responses that you want. And then just start reading about it, because people at this point, people have been doing some very cool stuff with it. Things that you hadn't even considered trying, and you'll ask questions a different way. You'll prompt your questions differently, and you'll get a whole different kind of result. I can't tell you how many different things I've done with it just every day for work, from creating documentation, which is painful, just writing things just to tell people how things work, to creating PowerPoint and stuff. It really gets you over that whole writer's block thing, where it's the blank page. Because even if it's not what you're going to use verbatim, and it almost never is, it'll at least get you to the point where you're like, oh, no, okay, I like this part. I think this is the direction I'm gonna go with it. I've tried to see. I wanted to see how far I can get in building a full-on application with it. So I wanted to try to build a Tinder clone. So I was like, hey, I am going to develop a Tinder clone. So write out this whole outline of everything I need to consider. And it gave me the whole, okay, it needs to be able to do this, X, Y, and Z. Okay, great. Now develop like a full-on architecture of services that I need to create. Okay, now from all these different services, create a to-do list of each item that has to be done. And then for each one of those, I went into that and said, okay, here's all the little sub items. Okay, now for this sub item, implement this. So write the code for it. And it did. It created all the code for it, and I put it all together. And it got pretty far before it started losing the plot there. A fun quirk about ChatGPT and these models in general is that they only have so much working memory in terms of what they can look back on. So eventually it sort of it forgets what you were originally talking about, and it'll kind of wander off a little bit. But it's incredible things that you can do with it. So if you want to learn how to use it, if you want to become acquainted, just get in there and play with it. And play is the exact right word. Have fun with it. The very first thing I did after writing a story is I was like, hey, I'm a D&D. I like playing D&D. So I asked it to DM a game for me, and it did reasonably well. Again, I was able to break it because it's not meant to do that, and I got it to do things it wasn't supposed to do. But it was cool that it could prompt me. It could describe the setting and adventure to me and say, okay, what do you want to do? I'm like, well, I want to do this, and then it would respond. So I just play with it. That's how you get it. That's how you get familiar.
Yeah, fair enough, dude. Any last nickels before we get you out of here?
Man, I feel like I would wander off on a long tangent if I did, but have fun with it. Don't be scared of it. This can only benefit us. It's, like I said, it's a great equalizer. So get out there and just learn it.
Yeah, for sure. Fair enough, dude. I appreciate your time. Really enjoyed the conversation. For those listening, if you've made it this far, then you'll know we fixed the technical difficulties mostly. And yeah, we'll see you guys next time. Peace.